Bienvenidos al auditorio de la Universidad Nacional en San Pablo de Heredia. Procedemos a detallar las instrucciones de seguridad en caso de una emergencia durante su permanencia en nuestras instalaciones. Estas instalaciones cuentan con servicio de atención prehospitalaria. Por tanto, en caso de presenciar algún accidente o padecimiento médico que requiera intervención externa, recurra de inmediato a los organizadores, edecanes o brigadistas presentes. Ellos coordinarán la atención. Ante un terremoto o incendio, mantenga la calma, no grite, no corra. Diríjase de forma ordenada hacia las puertas de salida. Dentro del auditorio encontrará 4 posibles salidas en caso de emergencia. Todas están libres de obstáculos para su uso en caso de requerirlo. Ubique desde este momento cuál se encuentra más cerca de usted e identifíquela como su ruta de evacuación en caso de emergencia. Diríjase a la salida con sus artículos personales. La zona de seguridad es el área libre frente al ingreso del auditorio. Una vez evacuado el edificio, no reingrese hasta que las autoridades competentes se lo indiquen. Buenos días. En nombre de la Universidad Estatal a Distancia, les doy la más cordial bienvenida al segundo día del Congreso Integración de Salud para un Océano Sostenible CISOS 24, organizado por el Consejo Nacional.
Organized by the National Council of Rectors, the French Embassy, and the National Academy of Science with the cooperation of InnoSpace. I extend a warm greeting to our special guests, both national and international, participants, and all those people that are following the transmission via unique wave. Be all of you welcome. Today we have met for the integration and synergy to see the sustainability,
evidenciando aportes científicos, tecnológicos y experiencias para el cumplimiento de los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible 2030 y así contribuir a la realización de acciones
they contribute to the plan of actions in consonance with the objectives of the decade for oceanic sciences. Being so, I have the pleasure of presenting to you the first activity of today, the Forum Blue Revolution, Impact and Legacy of the Unit in the marine ecosystems. For that, I have the pleasure of presenting the distinguished members of the main table. Mr. Rodrigo Méndez, Mr. Álvaro Herrera Villalobos, and Mr. Roberto Vargas, all of them academics and researchers from the university at a distance, National University at a distance. And from the podium, myself, Nancy Vázquez, communicator from the UNED and moderator for this space. Each participant will have time 15 minutes at a time for a small presentation of this topic, and in finishing the presentation of the 3 panel members, we will have a space for consultations. Following, we will begin with the first panel member, Mr. Rodrigo Méndez, where the topic is Leon in the South Caribbean of Costa Rica. Mr. Mendez is the master in charge of the program of the labs of the School of Exact Sciences of the UNED. In his process of environmental manager, with emphasis on local management of the Local Institute of Public Administration, manager of natural resources of the UNED, with a specialty in geographic information systems, aimed at the management of natural resources of the Tropical Agronomical Center for Research and Education, CATI, a technical consultant for the CETENA, and a researcher of the Vice Rectory of Research of the UNED since the year 2012. In his lines of research, he has worked on topics related to environmental ordinance in the territory, management of wildlife, environmental management, and local management, marine aquaculture, with the development of crops, clams, scaling productive for follicles in the line of multi-trophic aquaculture, and aquapony development for the food safety in the territories. Coordinator in projects of SEF and member of the control system of the invasive species is in the Caribbean, South Caribbean of Costa Rica. And at this moment, I invite you to see the following video. It is important to get to know themes, subjects that involve this thesis. We're talking about environmental, social, and economic aspect. I invite you very kindly to listen to this presentation and together be able to get to know a little bit more about this invasive species, the lionfish. With you, Master Rodrigo Mendez. Good morning to all of you. It's a pleasure. Well, you already knew me a little bit. Rodrigo Mendez at your service. This morning, I want to tell you a little bit about the research of the lionfish in the Southern Caribbean of Costa Rica. This was a very enriching experience because basically we worked with associates from the National University. And the important thing is that we were able to identify a problem and get to know that problem to be able to find a solution and pass it on to our society. Regarding this research, we're talking about the fact that the lionfish in Costa Rica has been present in Costa Rica since 2019 by first sighting by Dr. Elena Molina. This means that this is an invasive species that is now eradicated here in Costa Rica, living here in Costa Rica. At the National University of Distance, along with the UNA, we were able to make a joint project of the system to be able to cover all the fields at the social, economic, and biological levels. A little bit of a quick background of this topic of the lionfish. We know that our oceans are facing very marked axis for the deterioration of the oceans. In this case, the climate change, the overfishing, the contamination, and the deterioration of the ecosystems. But in this case, an invasive species that is already eradicated in the Southern Caribbean of Costa Rica represents a new stakeholder. And this new stakeholder, we have to have all the knowledge, biological knowledge, and their surrounding to know what problems they are having at a social level. The objective, the macro objective that we have set for this research project was basically to see what impact this lionfish has at the social, environmental, economic level. This as a topic, as a theme, to understand if it was a Troil bolitas or Troilminum specifically, to see what species it was. In the specific part of our research, We found a complete evolution of how we could interpret the dynamics, the population dynamics of the lionfish found here in Costa Rica, temporary characteristics of the biomass, which are the niches in which they are developed, and very importantly, the socio-economic part and the cultural part. What do the inhabitants of the South Caribbean know about this species? The study area, the southern part of the Caribbean, the Costa Rica, it is very important to determine it because not only was there a presence of the live fish in the southern Caribbean, like Andoja Manzanillo, but we're talking also about Uita Island. We were able to track there were some hotspots in the investigation where we were able to determine that only not the South Caribbean is being affected, but even the Uita Island also. One of the technological tools most used in this was geographic information systems. The images, hyperspectral images of high resolution gave us a lot of information of what was relevant, of the geospatial aspect of the species, the location, and the biomass of development of this specific species. I always like to explain a little bit how it is that we developed the research in regard to the sample. As I said, these were populations all the way from Isla Ubita to Andoja Manzanillo. It is very important to be aware that the invasive species does not know about the political divisions, be it a protected area or non-protected. There is an invasion, and it has to be handled integrally. The analysis of the samples that were obtained, they were specimens of lionfish that were captured by the local fishery associations, and they made the biometry to get to know a little bit about gonads and its stomach content. The surveys that were applied at that moment, we're talking about 2015, 2016, 17. And at that moment, it is the artificial intelligence, but at that moment, the atlas was our social tool to be able to make a neural red of concepts associated to the species and their perception at a social level. Sometimes being the first or being first at something in a table is not a synonym of a victory. Here we noticed with the analysis that we carried out that we are on the average. We are on the determination that the species in their size, weight, and length, we are similar to the region, so we are facing one same problem at a regional level. Our curve at the biological level, if we make a checklist of the lionfish, is very impressive to see how this was established. What does this mean? Well, it reached the habitat of the South Caribbean of Costa Rica and it established itself. High reproduction, millions and millions of fertilizations of their eggs in the water, in the watershed transported by the sea tide. High levels of reproduction, tolerance to all types of changes, be it because the Caribbean waters are tropical, but it is coming from Florida, and right now it's already reaching Brazil, so it has adapted in the best way possible to the greater Caribbean. And as you can see in the graph, the R curve is typical of invasive species that found a niche where to locate itself. The groups of interest, as I mentioned, they are distributed geospatially throughout the Caribbean, the South Caribbean, the central and south of the province of Limón in Costa Rica. This doesn't mean that we only have the hot spots of the lionfish there. But although you have heard that this is associated very much to the coral reefs, the fishers of the South Caribbean have been able to extract it down to 200 meters of depth with Lanasa fishing. So it's not something that they have just colonized those places. So the perception of the phenomena, presence of the society, well, there was a concern because the invasive species, we have been told that it was a species with poison, that it was very dangerous to manipulate it, and so forth. We simply needed a little bit of education to be able to develop an integral approach with the fishermen and with the part of research. We detect fishing attempts to minimize the diversity in the reef. We are talking about the fact that 95% of what he consumes is of commercial interest for the inhabitants of Puerto Viejo of Limon. So we are talking about that anything that fits in its mouth, it is going to indulge it. The fish might develop, socially speaking, if there is a species of the same size or greater. He is not going to have any problem of coexisting with it. But the moment that he feels that he can become a potential prey, he is going to be ingesting it. In the case of the link that we had at the social level with a part of the civil society, the most important thing was to educate the people, the children, for them to know that lionfish, if it is an invasive species, that it is causing damage in the coral reefs of their locality, that they can get to know it and see how they can face it at a local level. Very importantly, we have an invasive species here, but what can we do for this to be part of the value chain? What fishing arts and craft am I going to implement to be able to capture it? How am I going to cover this at the level of the fishermen? How are we going to extract it? How are we going to manipulate it? And what can we extract commercially from it? We are talking about the fact that it can be consumed at the moment of degrading its toxins. And what potential does it other parts have? Because if you only eat if it only eats high protein, it must be a fish with a very high protein level. In the innovation of the real men of the sea, who are the people who fish in the South Caribbean, they already worked at the Jamaican cage. This is a fishing technique for them, where they can capture the red pargus, and but how difficult it is to throw this basket 200 meters into the ocean and bring it up and have only lionfish. So they have found that la NASA of this type of fishing is an art that is very well used to be able to capture lionfish without direct contact, apart from the Hawaiian type of harpin that can also facilitate the capture on the field. Dissemination is very important to get to know the topic. It is something that is important, and it's important for the civil society to get to know about this topic. The importance of having this research, everything in order. I brought something here that I wanted to show you. That is maybe something very old, but this is the scientific passport that was used before for this type of research. And I keep it because since 2014 we have been following the lionfish, and we have to evidence that this is something that can continue on evolving as an investigation. And likewise, what I do, the calling, is the ethic at the moment of researching, because we have to be adequate. In the fishing tournaments, we have to have a fishing license to be able to extract the lionfish. It is not a simple formalism. We simply have to be in order. And if the law says that it is by doing scuba diving or by apnea, you have to have the corresponding license. So if you're going to do research with lionfish, you have to train in these special needs that we have to be able to be in order at the moment of researching this type of invasive species at the submarine level. I need you to pay a lot of attention to this video, because it's something that was discovered in having a species of lionfish in captivity. What is happening there? Well, at the level of aquarophilia, it is forbidden to have a lionfish in captivity. We had the opportunity of requesting a special permit for the research with Incopesca. So these lionfish have approximately 1 year of being in captivity. So here, what do I want to show with this? That the lionfish is carnivorous. carnivore. And at the level of the program of labs over there in San Jose, we have been able to determine that he is having phenotypic plasticity that is adaptive. Why? Because we are giving him algae that are vegetables. That's a vegetable protein, and he is intaking it. So this species adapts so well that as long as it has something to eat and keep it alive, he is going to it is going to continue on being present in all the Caribbean and all the conditions that take place. High, low temperature, high, low salinity, a lot of consumption of local species or local condition at the level of the species of fish, and we have been able to determine that it adapts to intaking another type of food. So be it algae, which is basically a concentrated food, but at the local level he doesn't have it. So for his need of survival, he was able to change this habit. Among our conclusions of the project, the biological case, we are talking about, at a biological level, we're talking about that larger fish were captured at a greater depth, demonstrating variation in the method of fishing. As I said, the baskets were part of a fishing craft that is very punctual, less invasive for other species, and simply it was just to throw the baskets, the cages, recover them, separate the mass of fish that were of commercial value, and be able to extract the live fish without suffering any type of puncturing. The biometrics, as you saw it in the graph, are very similar to in the region. In its structure, in the R curve, as I said, everything is adapted. We have taken advantage that it didn't have local predators in this case. In the Indo-Pacific, we have the ballesta, the balanced fish, the shark, which are their natural predators, but here we have not found evidence of finding it live here. So as to say that it has another competitors in the tropic chain. In the social field, the perceptions of going to a hospital and not knowing how to deal with puncture by a lionfish, what type of toxins are we facing? We know that it's a neurotoxin, and we know that it has acetylcholine. So how do we deal with this at a medical level? This situation. From its 18 spines or thorns, of which 13 are on the back, and 13 anal and 2 pelvic, contain the toxin. So that is something that is very important to know at the moment of manipulating it. And at the end, the innovation of the fishing craft is something that we have to be very selective. We're talking about an invasive species that we have to work with. Not only the part of research with the academia, but also in the state part, which would be our authorities, the Incopesca, SINAC, the SINAE, and finally, to thank this project. This project was carried out in 2014. It started. I consider that this species cannot be left unstudied. I invite the future researchers to continue on with this line of work in the South Caribbean, to always have this monitored. And at the end, to thank the colleagues, because this is teamwork. And we're talking about Dr. Liana Piedra, Master Michael Castillo, Rodolfo Ureña, who was our genetist, who was able to determine the phylogenetic tree. There was the Terroid bolita, Terroid million. We were able to determine that it was bolitas, the one that is invading us. And Mr. Roger Rios, with the proceed where the project began, Vanessa Morales and Alexander Vargas, along with Catalina Sanchez. To thank all of them for the attention, and I invite all of you to get to know a little bit more about this species, which is already a local stakeholder in the Caribbean with a lot of potential for study to be able to control. We're not going to eradicate it. We're going to be able to control it, and adding efforts from here In these type of stations, this is where we're going to be able to achieve many things so that we can work in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Master Mendes, for his knowledge. Right now, Álvaro Herrera Villalobos, clear in the ceiling of the forest. He has a geologist degree in the Missouri University, San Luis, USA. He worked in conservation, biodiversity, in the inventory of species, professor from the university at a distance university, Universidad Latina, and tourism university, short courses of INVIEW. Co-author of books, Fund for Sustainable Biodiversity, Investing Today for the Future, knowledge about for future biodiversity, and part of La Amistad Park, some audits about gathering information about biodiversity. Right now, he's as a tutor and researcher in the UNE. We'll see the following video. My name is Álvaro Herrera, part of the team of researchers. The project is evaluating the conservation of mangrove pibes and its relation with climate change. Specifically, I'm researching about some clear zones mangrove. He gets water from Rio Maria. It has a wide channel, which is the salty water. Measures about 5 square kilometers. It shows a variety of species related to the mangrove trees. Threads picture taken by Google Earth, you can see the distribution of these clear areas and can be identified as you amplify the picture and you can clearly see them and you can see them all over the mangrove.
Ya si uno se acerca con más detenimiento a través de las imágenes de Google Earth, pueden observar
If you
se observa a la
take a
izquierda,
closer view in the left side,
árboles, sin hojas, perdón, y algunos de estos árboles ya han perdido
and
la
some
rama,
of them
por
have
lo que solo
lost
queda el tronco erguido. Cuando
the
utilizamos
branches. We
ya
just see
drones, pudimos verificar que realmente lo que
naked
estábamos
tree.
observando en Google Earth correspondía realmente a la realidad que se observaba en el campo, como lo pueden ver en la fotografía a la derecha.
And as we are emphasizing or
Ya las visitas
concentrated
a
on
podemos constatar que están formados por varios árboles muertos, todos
different
ellos
canopies,
aún
these are
vivos,
dead
pero sin
trees.
ramas ni hojas. Algo interesante que se observa en el cambio que
What
ven a
we
través de la fotografía
see in these pictures in Google
es
Earth,
que el área
it's the
básicamente
area basically have
que va alrededor
it was is rounded and elliptical area. It's a very defined area, as you can see here. Next,
en esta es la fotografía de otro sitio que visitamos.
another
Igual,
site,
están árboles muertos, aún
dead
erguidos,
trees
sin hojas y sin
standing,
siguiente.
no leaves.
Cuando se acerca uno a estos troncos, puede
Close
observar
view.
una serie de agujeros
You see some
en esta fotografía
holes
que llaman mucho la atención porque son muy
which
abundantes.
are abundant.
Inclusive algunos que aún no han perdido la
Some
corteza,
have not
se
lost
pueden
the
observar.
bark, but you can see these.
En algunos de estos
holes.
troncos,
In some of
hemos
these
observado una
trunks we
del agujero,
see
provocado
expanding
muy
the hole,
posiblemente por
maybe
pájaros
done
carpinteros,
by
lo cual
carpenter
nos da un indicio que
birds.
posiblemente alguien estaba buscando larvas.
They were looking for larvae of an insect
Y
inside.
efectivamente,
And
sacamos
yes,
fotos de la corteza,
we found
logramos
inside the
captar
bark
unas larvas como la que se muestra
some
ahí.
larvae, as it is shown there, evidently with this part of an insect.
Para eso, entonces,
For
tomamos la
this,
decisión
we
de tomar
decided
una muestra de
to
algunos
take
de
a
estos
sample
troncos,
from
sobre todo
these
troncos pequeños que
three
facilitaran su corta, y su
trunks.
traslado al laboratorio. Y
To
como pueden ver,
take them to the lab.
estaban muy perforados
It
por
has a
estas
lot of
larvas,
perforations by
lo que
these
nos indicaba que
larvae,
sí
indicating
estaban
that
afectados
they had
por
been
estos
affected
insectos.
by these insects.
En uno de los troncos, mientras los
In
cortábamos,
one of
encontramos
the
esta
trunks we
pupa,
found,
que es evidentemente de un escarabajo.
this
Y por el
is
arco de las
as
antenas
part
de la
of
pupa
a
evidenciaba
scaravage,
que se trataba de un
and it
cerapisco.
was Serapiscos.
Los troncos que llevamos al laboratorio fueron criados en
The
condiciones
trunks we took to the lab were
de
created
encierro para evitar que los adultos
were
que
isolated
vendrían se escaparan. Y
in
logramos
order to
obtener varios
avoid,
adultos. Ahí ustedes tienen la fotografía de uno de estos, que es un
so
cerapicio
the
que fue
insect could
identificado
stay
con el nombre
trapped there. One of these is
Scontilaspis
Scontilaspis
No existe
bullatus.
mucho reportado en la
We don't
literatura
have a lot
sobre
of
este
this
insecto.
insect in the literature, but it has been identified in the country, and it has a distribution. It goes from Ecuador all the way to Costa Rica, mostly in the Pacific coastline. Evidently, this scavenge was not the cause because it was concentrated in one area. The scavenge would like to use trees all over the forest, but here dead trees were concentrated in a specific area. Exploring a little bit, we decided to extend to these mangroves with close, and in this picture you can see 4 of the mangroves we explored. The first one outside Matalimon, then Tibibes, and nearby Bajamar, and then Huacalillo mangrove. As you can see, just in the Tibibes. This was opening the possibility of extending this investigation to other areas.
En este gráfico pueden ver ustedes los tamaños de
You can
estos
see the
doceles
sizes of these canopies.
del dosel. Esto fue un poco jugando con los datos que teníamos para explorar
Playing with the data to see if we could find a pattern. Clearly not. The size of these canopies vary from 75 meters all the way to 2200. So we have different sizes in the three mangroves we are exploring.
Esta otra fotografía aparece en los años en que se evidencia
Years,
la primera aparición de
evidence
estos claros en el dosel.
of the first appearance of these clear areas with Google Earth. You can have a backwards perspective in time. When the clear area began, it is formed by an image. You see a brownish image, and depending on the picture, what we find it's the canopy of the tree without leaves. The distribution of these years it's different. Some years we have a lot of clear areas present. In 2016, for example, in Tivives and Huacalillos, mangroves, but we still don't have an important pattern.
Revisando un poco la bibliografía sobre el origen de estos doseles,
Bibliography about these canopies, these clear areas, we find some authors that quote biotic factors, which are like termites and other insects. When this is reported, normally it's just a branch that is affected, is damaged and then falls. So this is very small clear area that is created, but we found bigger clear areas within a biotic factors are the effects of hurricanes and thunderstorms. In terms of thunderstorms is what we find in the field, circular areas where we have several dead trees and trees without branches. So what the investigation is suggesting is these clears in the canopy are being called. Our trees were struck by different effects of the thunderstorms. We have to keep investigating. Everything indicates everything the causes are. And insects are just taking advantage of the situation to which these trees fall. This is where we are. We has been investigating for 3 months and we have a long way to go. Thank you for the team, also for Strategic Alliance. Thank you.
Agradecemos al máster
Thank you,
Álvaro
Álvaro Herrera.
Y a continuación cedo el espacio al señor Roberto Vargas
Next, Roberto Vargas Macins.
Ritmo de la marea. Caracterización del paisaje
The
acústico.
rhythm of the tide, coastal areas of Punta Morales, Punta Arenas. Mr. Vargas is a tropical biologist and management of natural resources. Right now he's taking a master's degree on biology in society. He works in the lab of research and
de la
technological
Secretaría de
investigation
Investigación de la
of the
UNED.
research
Ha trabajado en
investigation of the
proyectos de
UNED. He had worked
investigación
in
en
the research
bioacústica
projects in
con aves y
bioacoustics
mamíferos,
with
monitoreo
birds,
acústico y paisajes sonoros,
monitoring and
detección y
sound,
clasificación automatizada de fauna en Costa Rica.
fauna,
También ha
and
desarrollado
flora.
proyectos
Had
en la
developed
ciencia
projects
participativa
through
y ha sido
participating
consultor en diversos proyectos de conservación o
projects about
investigación.
conservation and
Ha
research.
publicado
He had
diversos
published
artículos
different
científicos
articles
en revistas
in
indexadas
index
sobre temas
journeys
de
about
ornitología,
ornithology,
ecología,
ecology,
bioacústica, paisajes
bioacoustics,
sonoros y detección acústica
sound,
automatizada.
sight, scenes.
Actualmente
He
forma
is
parte de la
part
junta
of
directiva
the
del
board
capítulo de Costa Rica, la
of Costa Rica
Sociedad de
chapter,
Ingeniería en Medicina y Biología,
Society of
y
Biology
la
and
consultora
Medicine,
Ceira Estudios
and
Biológicos. Así que
Seiba
con
Consulting
ustedes el licenciado
firm.
Roberto Vargas.
Roberto Vargas have the floor.
Buenos días.
Good morning.
Bueno, me alegra mucho ver
Very
bastantes
happy
caras jóvenes.
to see very young
Sé que
persons.
el tema tal
The
vez sea
audience,
nuevo
I
para algunos
think
y puede motivarlos
this topic was new
eventualmente
for some, and
a
this
realizar
could be a
investigación en este campo.
motivation to
Bueno, el
undertake
trabajo
an
lo realicé
investigation.
en conjunto con
I
mis compañeros
did
y
it
en
with
portugués,
several
y
of my
actualmente también
peers
continuó esa línea de investigación en sonido.
that are following
Trabaja
this
actualmente
line
con
of
ballenas
sounds
y con
investigation.
Así que
Now they're working on
este
whales,
práctica de bachillerato en la
sounds that
Universidad
were
Nacional.
part of their practice for their BA.
Parte de lo que me
National
gustaría contarles
University,
es que
I'd like to
el
tell you,
paisaje
is the
acústico forma
acoustic
parte del paisaje que podemos
sightseeing is
analizar
part
en cualquier momento.
of what we can analyze at
De la
any
manera en
time.
la que podemos
The
realizar
way we can do this
estas mediciones es
is
mediante grabaciones
measures
pasivas o
is
grabaciones
passive
activas. Entonces,
recording
nosotros
or
realizamos
active recordings.
principalmente
We mainly
monitoreo acústico pasivo, que es
did a
básicamente
passive
dejar grabadoras en campo
acoustic
para poder
monitoring. We
obtener
left
diferentes indicadores de ese
recordings
paisaje. En el
on
caso y el
site.
contexto, por ejemplo, hoy de océanos y aguas, pues
In the
en muchos
context
casos
that
tenemos
why we're here today,
visibilidad
waters,
limitada,
we
¿verdad?
have
En
a
algunos ecosistemas.
limited visibility in some
Y parte de lo que
ecosystems, and
podemos
part
hacer
of what we
es
can do
realizar este tipo de
is to
monitoreos. Entonces, ese paisaje
undertake
acústico
this type
básicamente
of
tiene
monitors. This
diferentes elementos.
acoustic
Uno de esos elementos son las
investigation
biofonías, que es
is
todo lo sonidos que
biophony
provienen de los
sounds
animales, de la parte
from
biológica.
animals
Pero
or
también
the
está un componente muy
biological
especial que simplemente
part.
me voy a concentrar acá, que es
They have
específicamente
a
las geofonías,
component
que
with the
básicamente son sonidos que provienen de la
geophonies,
naturaleza, pero no tienen
sounds
origen
from
biológico.
nature but are not
Entonces, un ejemplo
biological in
bastante
origin.
sencillo
An
de verlo es, por
example,
ejemplo, el oleaje, ¿verdad? El sonido del
it's the
mar.
way the ocean waves.
Entonces, parte de lo que se
Part
pretende
of
en
what
ese
we
concepto,
pretend with this
específicamente
concept
es poder monitorear
to
diferentes
monitor
variables.
different
Por ejemplo,
variables.
los sonidos geofísicos
Geophysical
tienen
sounds have
variabilidad tanto diaria como
variability,
estacional. Y uno de estos
seasonal,
ejemplos pueden ser las
daily.
mareas específicamente.
This could be specific
Bueno,
tides.
ahorita les voy a explicar un poquito más,
I'll explain
pero
more,
básicamente lo
but
podemos
basically we
clasificar
can
como un tipo de
classify
geofonía continua.
geophony, which is a
Básicamente,
continuous
durante largos
sound,
periodos
long
van a
periods of
estar
time.
generando
They will be generating information. This geophony comes from the word, the Greek geo, which means earth, and phone. It has to do with sounds, tides, the domain. We have high and low tides. These variations at that sea level could be several meters depending on the area we are located, but they're generated around every 6 hours. So we have high tide, low tide. Basically, our goal was to use this sound to characterize these acoustics sightings to determine high and low tide. We can enter different platforms. Marine portal tell us about the hour, the level of the tide, and we can relate it with the sounds specifically, which was our goal to characterize with these sounds with the tight cycles. So part of this practice, we concentrated specifically in variables of geophonic aspects. We did this study specifically in Punta Morales, precisely in the central part of Punta Arenas. We can see the 4 points in red, yellow, pink, blue in different areas. Areas characterized with that sand. Those were close to the mangrove, have more sludge, so we wanted to find out the variations in sound for each one of these places. So we characterize different biophonies and geophonies. They were was focused mainly on sea waves, possibly depending on the site, to have more wind. Use for the persons who work with the marine part. There is a variation of this technology, which is hydroponic. Underwater. Sound sightings, some specialized and we wanted to use the main ones related to some anthropophony, human origin sounds, where we find the possibility to depend on the type of substrate. This sound of the ocean waves would have an important impact because somehow it's a very strong noise depending on the site. Also, we use these three specifically called difference normalizing sound that establish a difference between different sounds. If it is positive, more sound of biological origin. If it is negative, more human origin. We have technophonies generated by humans, but also could have the same impact, acoustic entropy related to geophonies. And what it measures is the entropy of sounds in that place, and the last one was noise. For us, it's common that level of decibels you can hear in that place. Basically, the first thing we found, starting from sound, we can visualize the high and low tide. With increase of the noise generated on site, we wanted to characterize for each one of the indicators how was this behavior in the sites, in this case that were rocky or more sand, had higher values in anthropophonies and geophonies. That's what we were expecting in each one of them. Within one of the sites, we found significant differences, and then when we compare each one of them ad hoc test, this comparison show us there's no difference between the beach and where the waves break. In case we denominated as a street, which was mangrove area, it was very narrow with a big impact in relation with the road. Values were more targeted to biophonies. In that area precisely, we had a lot of birds. And in the other case, in the beach site, we found more geophonies. When we compare in high tide with low tide, we find significant differences between high and low tide, which was one of the goals we had, to compare this difference in the case of the ocean and the road, which were not close to the rocks and sands where the waves break. We didn't find significant differences when we compare sea level with these platforms I told you with marine ROM or to provide this the height of the tide in blue, two tones of blue, they behave more similarly during high and low tide, which is the place where the waves broke in rocky areas. The movement of water can be used good, good way to characterize high and low tide. We have where we had more sludge, the tide does not impact so much. Basically, something that where we were interesting, especially if those sites close, depending on the type of substrate, had an impact, and eventually to use them for this type of studies. These areas, the one I mentioned, mangrove or forest, favor the presence of biological sounds. Indicators were more focused on them and they generate a barrier. Having all of this vegetation, we generate a barrier for this noise that is being generated and everything. We take into account these sludge areas that are very plain. These indexes are focused in the acoustic terrestrial area, but since we have a marine terrestrial area, it's interesting area for characterization. We're working in terms of noise, but not just acoustic area. In the upper part of the water, but also underwater, the effect of engines and vessels in the acoustic space. It could be very interesting opportunities. The substrate has an impact and modifies that structure of acoustic in that place. And the other thing, a lot of these indicators can be important for characterizing different environments in that area. As we get far away from that area, we get different noises depending on the substrate. I'd like to mention and to incentivize this type of technology, the use of this new theme has to do with bioacoustics in mangroves and marine area. Some people are working with in the University of Costa Rica studies on whales, but also they can study dolphins. And there are some other types of fish that have some sounds. And when these areas where we find mangroves, there is a chaos, to say it somehow, a lot of problems. Climate change, the use of these specific areas to incentivize this type of researchers that this can be realized to produce new indicators into thinking the lab. The EGMAR station from University Nacional is where we were the time. And Kati were very useful during the tours. Thank you for your attention.
We want to thank Licensed Vargas for having shared all this information with us. At this moment, we're going to open up a space for questions. After the questions, we have to continue on and fulfill the program. So the people who are interested in making a question, we invite you to please raise your hand so that we can have the floor assistants take a microphone to you. Anybody with a question, please raise your hand. Oh, back here, in the back, and then here. Okay? In the back and then up front. My question is regarding the openings in the mangroves, of the canopy of the mangrove. Is there the possibility that this opening might have a benefit for the mangrove? Or if not, what would be the consequence that is expected from that, from those clearings in the mangrove? literature, it is stated that these openings in a mangrove work very similar to what happens in a clearing in a forest, tropical forest. It is part of the regeneration or youthening of the forest. So when we have an opening like this in a mangrove, we start the germination of some seeds of some of the species of the trees of the mangrove. And then the process of scarring takes place until the canopy is completely recovered. So we do have an important role. They do have an important role in the regeneration of the forest. Thank you very much. And here in the front and the center, we have a question. Could you please stand up so that we can take the microphone to you? Thank you. Thank you very much. My question would be for Mr. Rodrigo, with the issue related to the lionfish. The study that you carried out, did you ever calculate the populational sizes or the density of the lionfish? And it's 3 questions, to be honest. Have you evaluated the economic impact, the real economic impact for the fishermen, for the fishery industry, in terms of numbers of the species that are being affected? And are there cases of intoxications with lionfish? If you could activate the microphone, please. Okay, what is your line? What is your name? Alejandro, thank you for your question. Let's go to let's go quickly because you made 3 questions. I'm going to do the first one. Populational density. You talked about that if we had made studies about the populational density of the lionfish, the specialists of the national universities, the biologists in charge of the monitoring, applied the statistics, the corresponding respective statistics to be able to calculate what were the rates of specific population through the hotspots that had been determined. Not only to ask a fisherman where he had observed the fish, but also to do by monitoring in specific transactions using submersible cameras to be able to analyze it with an intelligent software. And at that moment, we didn't have a possibility like the one we have now with artificial intelligence, but we were able to determine within the video transactions to determine which species were associated to the lionfish and which were lionfish in those videos. So in the study, we can talk a little bit more in depth about that and give you results out of those densities. Because yes, there are many numbers that were produced by the research. So it would be my pleasure. The second question was the economic impact. Do you have numbers for the economic impact? In the South Caribbean, for the people who are really suffering the invasion of the lionfish, they have it very clear that it is an invader who is finishing with the population of the schools of fish from the commercial species for them, be it a lobster, snapper, and that the dynamic of the fishing day after day is reduced. That definition was made. We went to the fisheries of Cieneguita. We spoke with the fishermen there, and they gave us the real numbers of how much Incopesca had reported before the invasion and after the invasion. So there are data that are very important that are revealing that, yes, definitely the species has a significant impact on the socio-economic part, but it also has within the good, the bad, or within the bad, the good. What are we going to do with this species? Because we're going to have it in our present ecosystem. So that leads me to the third question, to the intoxication aspect. Since this is a neurotoxin, in increasing the temperature, we might be able to neutralize it. So intoxications, they might take place because there is a pattern that somebody had an event with a lionfish and reacts allergically to this. At this moment, there is no studies. There are no studies here in Costa Rica in which we can deal with a neurotoxin with an antiphotic serum or a serum that is specific for lionfish, which is another probable investigation that has to be carried out. But there is the other counterpart, which is that if I consume the lionfish, I am going to intoxicate myself because of the toxin. At the moment of cooking it, the levels of the toxin is degraded, and it can be managed like any commercial. We just have to eliminate the thorns, and we can work at a whole fillet, or it can be in any other presentation. In this case, we had the opportunity of working along with National Learning Institute, and they developed a recipe book that if you want to, I can share with you this recipe book. It has infinity of ways of presenting the lionfish in its culinary and gastronomic way, and with the potential that it might be given to the people in the South Caribbean zone, and how to sell it as a species that has a potential in its menu, because it can have an added value, not only in its meat, but also the protein levels that it has. So hopefully this has answered you with punctuality. Thank you for your questions. Okay, if anybody has a last question. Okay, since there are no further questions, we would like to thank the participants for their participation in this and for the questions. And with this, we finish with this forum called Blue Revolution: Impact and Legacy of the UNED and the Marine Ecosystems. We thank you we thank the UNED for the space, and we leave you here with the next activity. Thank you very much.
Using our Gantt chart feature, you can map out your team's tasks and set dependencies to ensure
morning. We give you the warmest welcome to the conversational, healthy, and energetic coastal lines. The technological contribution of Costa Rica to the socioeconomic local development through the valuing of natural resources. In this conversation, we are going to talk only about two research projects that are being developed at this moment by the Technological Institute of Costa Rica. It is specifically about sea waves, the first one, and the second one is called Ecomara. EcoSea or Ecomar, is the first study of emerging contaminants in ocean waters of Costa Rica and Central America, which has finished with trainings and a manual of good practices so that the people that harvest the mussels might be able to ensure to their customers the safety of their products. To go deeper into this initiative and that you might be able to understand a little bit better what it's all about, I invite you to see the following video. The oysters and mussels are very high nutritional value products, and that every day they're more of the like of tourists, nationals, and foreigners. Costa Rica is the only country in Central America that has been able to establish farming plans for these mussels. It is in the island and the coast of the Gulf of Nicoya, where several associations led mainly by women and with the guidance of the public universities have adopted this innovative way of producing from the sea. It is an option so that these communities, coastal communities that are normally dependent on the fishery, might generate income, additional income in a sustainable way and according to their reality. So this is a harvest crop that requires a lot of care on the people who produce them and the constant surveillance in view of any threat that might reach human health. As a matter of fact, we are always very much willing to take this, submit this to the NASA national test. We take this water from 1 and 5 meters of depth for analysis to know that here in the Gulf, for example, in this part, there are no contaminants that might damage the human health for the people who intake our product. We believe that it is necessary to make analysis so that we can complement what they do with other type of equipment. The project Ecomar is the first study in Costa Rica and Central America that is focused on analyzing contaminants, emerging contaminants in water beds and in live organisms. The intention of studying or evaluating the presence of emerging contaminants in coastal zones is to achieve a diagnosis of the health of the water environment of that zone. By using organisms these are organisms that are filters of water, and we can consider them sort of like we can consider that this is a passive sampling that we do, that we can map in long periods of time how the health of the environment in which they grow is. Of the water environment in which they grow is. So the interest of identifying this is to raise possible alerts or to raise flags and diagnose if it is a source of contamination or another that is we have to pay attention to avoid that contaminant from increasing. Ecomar has analyzed in depth the presence of contaminants, both microorganisms in the oysters and the mussels in the Gulf of Nicoya. And the scientists have found that processes for the management and the cleansing are highly effective to guarantee the safety of these products for the consumers. In their final objective, the project was focused on transferring this information onto the producer associations and to provide them an illustrated manual of good practices, post-harvest practices that will help them to continue on guaranteeing that the oysters and that the mussels that come from the Gulf of Nicoya are of the highest quality and they are safe for consumption. This is something that contributes in helping improve the practices, so that when we give them hard scientific data, that the process of cleansing allows them to reduce microorganisms that are present and also contribute to reducing the amount of chemicals. They say that these product is ready to take to the market, a product that is more healthy. In this way, the universities, public universities, through the project Ecomar, have contributed to the growth of the associations that produce oysters and mussels in the Gulf of Nicoya. A study that is unique in its class. In what way the residue of substances such as sunscreens and medications and veterinary products are reaching our oceans. It has been an experience that is really very good for us. We have had the support of the community. It has been a community that is extremely good for us coming from the university. So all of them all together have presented a strategy and a blessing to us so that we might be able to carry out this entrepreneurship. So I request Ms. Nancy Alisa Castro and the young man, Adrian Romero Villalobos, to stand up. They are the ones who are leading today this initiative, and I would like to present them so that you can also identify them during this conversation. Thank you very much. And let me tell you that Ms. Alisa is an educator, researcher of the University of Chemistry of the Technological Institute of Costa Rica. She has a doctor's degree in sciences of the water from the Montpellier University in France. And she has 21 years of professional experience between the public and the private sector. While the young man, Romero, is a recent graduate from a career of biotechnology from the Technological Institute of Costa Rica. He has experience in research, entrepreneurship, biotechnologicals, and in university tutoring. And following, I present to you the second project of research, of which we will talk this morning. That is called C-Wave, an initiative that was born in the year 2015, and which has an objective to produce electricity from the sea tides, from the waves. So I invite you to see the following video with the participation of C-Wave. Researchers from the Technological Institute of Costa Rica are generating the electricity generation project based on the waves of the sea. The E-Wave project that was born as an initiative of the students in 2015, but nevertheless, for the second stage, we have baptized it as E-Wave 2.0, and it is being carried out by the School of Electromechanics of the Technological Institute. In this second stage, we are focusing on improving the operation of the converter of energy, and we are improving its operation through control strategies. The device has an operation that is very simple. The movement of the waves moves a buoy, and the buoy is joined to an arm. And this arm is the one that activates an electric generator that converts the energy of the movement of the wave into electric energy, ready for consumption. Well, the important thing about the ocean energy in general is that it is a clean, renewable, never-ending source. So it allows us to reach objectives of world agendas that we have, like, for example, carbon neutral for 2050, and also answer a little bit to the 2030 agenda. In general, the energy of the sea is abundant, it's very dense, but apart from that, it's also very predictable. And this means that we can generate sources or make use of this source of energy in a very reliable manner to supply the network. In the planet, there are several devices for producing energy based on the waves. We can mention some of them located in the waters of Hawaii, France, Israel, Italy, Portugal, and Spain. In general, the ocean energy is one of the most clear renewable energy that we have at this moment. As a matter of fact, when we compare the sea, ocean, to the wind or the sun, it is 4 times more expensive. What we're trying to do here is to improve the operation of the system to reduce that gap that there is between the cost of other energies, clean energies, or that we have available to produce clean energy with that of the ocean energy. E-Wave pretends to become a platform for all types of planning with oceanic energy. Anybody would say when they see the tank working, generating waves and producing electricity, that we are already concluding the project, when it is completely the opposite. At this moment, we have focused on researching the operation of one single device, but we have to the future projected the research of what we know as farms. And this is something that we are going to set up in the seas. It will allow us to extract more energy, which will be translated into cheaper energy. This at the end is going to facilitate to be able to take all this energy to the coastal areas of our countries, and at the end it's going to be translated to also being able to improve the electrical grid of our country. And I request that Mr. Juan Luis Guerrero Fernandez and Mr. Christopher Vega Sanchez to please stand up. They are the researchers that will be talking to us about the project of E-Wave. Please, you can take your seat again. Let me tell you that Mr. Guerrero is an educator. He is a researcher of the Electromechanical School of the Tech with a master's in the science of mechatronics from the University of Aston in Germany. And he has a doctor's PhD in matters related to optimum control from the University of Stainfield in England. While Mr. Vega is a professor of mechanical engineering and researcher of the Technological Institute of Costa Rica. He obtained his master's degree in Germany in design and simulation, mechanical simulation, as well as a PhD in Australia for the modification of surfaces for mechanical applications. We are going to give way to this conversation where I'll tell you how the methodology works. This is really a conversational. So we are going to interact between the five of us. We're going to make some questions to them. But as we advance, you can also pose your questions, whatever questions you might have in real time. For that, we are going to use this QR that we are going to put on the screen right now. It will be up in the screens for a moment. The idea is for you to be able to scan that QR code, and through that application, be able to make the question that you might have for the researchers. The idea, there it is. There's the QR code that is being projected at this moment. The idea is that you might be able to, with your cell phone, take the QR code right now. There are several people are already doing it. So, as they talk, you can make your questions. And I'm going to receive all the questions, and I'm going to pose them in real time. I'm going to give you a little time because I see that there are several people that at this moment are scanning the code. Okay, so we're going to begin this conversation. Now, the first question that I would like to make to the researchers is, I'm going to begin by Ms. Nancy. What does the project, the research project, consist on? In a very simple way, so that everybody might be able to understand it. It's a pleasure to be with you today. It's very nice to be here with you, and also with all the people that have come to visit us from abroad, that have presented some interest for the project that we have been able to develop at the Technological Institute of Costa Rica. Well, ECOMAD, basically what it's all about is generating the first line of contamination in coastal zones to be able to evaluate the health of the water environment. With this, what are we pretending to do? Well, to use an organism like the mussels and the oysters that, because of their particularity, they feed through filtering of the water, and they can easily accumulate the different substances that are located in the environment in which they are being developed. Because they are very good indicators for us to be able to achieve and determine if there is a presence or absence of contaminants in those places where they grow. Apart from that, the project allows to collaborate both in the improvement of the line of production and the productive activities of the associations that generate the oysters and the mussels. In other words, mariculture. Because our intention is that apart from mapping the health of the coastal areas, it is also to be able to contribute with this productive activity that has that has been growing in the last years, and it is a solution and a possibility for these families. That is in general the idea of Ecomar. Sorry. Professor, I have here the first question. They are asking me, have you already detected in your research some contaminants in the water, in the oysters, and what has been the main contaminants that you have found? What have been the main contaminants? Yes, they have been determined at this moment. We have detected they are below the limit of detection, instrumental detection of the technique with which the analysis have been carried out. Nevertheless, in spite of the fact that they have been detected, the concentration is so low that what it tells us is that according to the World Health Organization, that it is not riskful for the human health, the consumption of those organisms. But the objective of Comar has always been to map firsthand how the coastal zones are. We could have the intuition that there was detection of contaminants, but the main objective of Comar is to generate the warnings, to look for the sources of contamination that we have to attack, so that this does not continue on reaching the coastal zones, and therefore not to continue on affecting the water organisms. And there are presence we have detected in water. In water, we have detected 5 molecules. In the organisms, we have detected 3. And basically, there are others that have been quantified, but once again, they are below the threshold that is considered to be riskful by the World Health Organization. In other words, we can continue on consuming fish, oysters, and mussels, no problem. You can continue on bathing in the sea in the vacation periods. Whenever you visit, nothing happens. It's only to generate the awareness to the population and to the companies, to the productive activities, especially cattle that use veterinary products or medication of human use, that they cannot be discarded via the lavatory or the sink or anything like that. We have to do an adequate and we have to be aware that the water treatment plants of the different companies of Costa Rica, they need to give their technology not only to eliminate the microbiological part, but also these type of emerging microorganisms. And also, maybe to retake this topic, because you are showing this presentation right now, the total of the first research that you have carried out, there are more than 200,000 people receiving benefits from that. Yes, it's 126 women and 85 men that are part of the different associations, oysters and mussels. And well, this is an effort that obviously is not only born from the tech, but it's also from the different universities, public universities of Costa Rica, like the UNED, the UNA, the UCR, 2 international universities, the University of Montpellier, Brazil, the University of Montpellier in France, the University of Sao Paulo in Brazil, and a series. It's a multidisciplinary research group that allowed us to carry out this study, because if not, it would have not been possible to cover so much area and so many objectives that were proposed. I would like to thank that we have present the people from the UNED, the UNED, who are the producers and managers of the unconditional support of the Association of the Cheetah that produces mussels, and also to the National University, who are the ones who have been in charge of managing the companion of the oysters, and well, the rest of the colleagues, that without them it would not have been possible to make this first mapping, nor the cooperation to the associations. And now I'm asking Mr. Christopher, what does the E-Wave project, what is it looking for? What is it seeking? Well, good morning to all of you. Thank you for the invitation, for having us here. It is a pleasure to be here. Well, the particularity of the seas and the oceans is that they are constantly moving. And for us as engineers, the movement is translated into energy. So the main objective of E-Wave, or let's say E-Wave, is really in two lines. I believe that both of them are very important. The first idea that we have, how do we make those systems for the use of energy might be more efficient? Well, precisely to attack what we have seen in the video, which is that the ocean energy at this moment is relatively expensive. It's clean, it's very predictable, it's dense, it is very much available for access to it, but unfortunately, when we compare it with wind and solar energy that are also clean energies, it turns out that the ocean energy is 4 times more expensive. So this makes it very little attractive for investors to allocate money to develop this technology. And what we want to do in E-Wave is, how do we do for the system to be more efficient, so that it might use the energy more efficiently, and that the cost of the kilowatt of energy that we produce that might be cheaper. And that is our first objective. And the second objective is something that has to do with what you have on screen, which is precisely that when we see the territory of Costa Rica, we notice that only 1/10 of the territory in Costa Rica is land. The other 9/10 of the territory is water. The territorial seas that we have is very, very broad. And we at this moment have not taken advantage of the energy resource that we have in the waters. So to understand a little bit the objectives, the international objectives of carbon neutral for 2050, the Agenda 2030, to make the energy accessible for everybody, we propose that we will develop systems that eventually we will be able to use to take advantage of this energetic resource that the country has in its waters. I don't know if you want to add something in regard to the energy resource. Good morning, yes, of course. Thank you for giving me the opportunity of sharing the project that we are developing in the tech as an activity. Yes, as Christopher was saying, one of the advantages that we have as a country is that our territory is mainly marine territory. And for example, in 2013, we made a research. We studied the marine resource that we have the potential that the resource has in Costa Rica. And we found that, for example, we have a 2.3 gigawatts capability of extracting energy. In that study, we took into account the energy of the waves, of the tides, and of the sea currents. And this data that we have here, 2.3 gigawatts, is a data that in theory is real. It is not theoretical. And this value, so that you might have an idea, might help us in feeding, taking into account the average consumption. It might allow us to give energy to approximately 6 million houses with Costa Rican standards. So we have a lot of potential. The only problem is that we have to do it, and it's very expensive. So the objective of the project is to try to reduce or to improve the efficiency, so that at the long term, the energy will be much cheaper. Here I am being questioned, what does the country plan to continue on to start implementing this type of energy, and the production of energy with waves of the sea, is that more effective in open seas or in the coastal areas? Where is it more effective? what do we but the technology itself, it is not being used 100% to feed grits, for example. So worldwide, the prototypes exist. How to put the prototypes here in Costa Rica, maybe that's going to require the interconnection of many stakeholders in this. The universities contribute in developing the technology and developing how to develop the systems, but definitely we're going to require capital to do so. So now, with regard to the potential, the energy potential that we have, it is better to, if it's better to do it in the coastlines or open sea. If you see the image there, the red colors, that's where we have the greatest potential, the greatest density energy produced by the waves. And the greener parts is where the density is smaller. So close to the coast, the density is smaller. Does that mean that we cannot make use of it? No, it means that we also have to try to take advantage of that part. The resource is more abundant in deep seas where the systems can be put, but E-wave is a system that can be put on the coast. And why do we want to start working with a system that we can install close to the coast? Well, the reason is that this is going to make things much more simple for us to begin with. We don't need too much equipment to go into open seas. We don't make any bases in the sea floor. It's just the maintenance of the system is much smaller, much cheaper, and it's going to give us information to see how these systems work, and eventually, hopefully, the use of this energy will be for the socio-economic development of the zone, of the coastal zones of the country. So, Professor, with regard to the project, with regard to your project, the view to the future, to take care of the environment, what has it been? From the point of view of Ecomar, the intention is to also board the cleaner production practices, and that is something that was also a sub-topic that was developed within Ecomar, within the project of Ecomar, and it facilitated a thesis for the attention of a degree in environmental engineering, and this allowed us to see what the shortages that the associations have at this moment, to be able to contribute with them to the future, to be able to improve the productive practice and make it maybe even a more circular economy, and to make productive activity that is greener, and to continue on strengthening it, because it's not the same to create also the culture with regard to the mussel producers, as my colleagues from the UNED was saying, that there is still a practice in which there is still a practice of extraction of native mussels, not from the productive farming as such. So I believe that we still have to create more awareness, and I think that that's where the project might also start collaborating in the well-being of our seas, of our oceans, especially the aquatic organisms. And Professor, they're saying here that in spite of the high contamination that is generated by Costa Rica and by other nations, the project has given a result that the marine products are still within the consumable limits. So the question is, what is the standard or the instrument that you are using to determine if the marine products are still within the limits? There are no standards. That's why, before I was commenting, I said that from the WHO. Costa Rica has a standard regulation? No. The Central America? No. Latin America? No. The European Union, they have a mapping that began practically 2 decades ago, that has been led by France, and that it has super monitored year after year in the different stations, the different seasons that they have, the variation of the emerging contaminants, especially drugs within the water. And from the worldwide level, there is not a monitoring in biota. What we have are efforts to identify molecules, independent molecules, to see which are those effects on the organisms when it is exposed to those drugs. Labs, or maybe when they have them scaled or making an exposition when they have scaled at a natural level. We rule ourselves by the limits to be able to say if it is a harmful consumption according to the limits that are established for limits established for water. We have water. Water. These values are found below potential risk for the human being. So that are below that biota, then we assume the conclusion is that it is not riskful. It is very important for you to bear this in mind. Now, if you go and look in the last study that was determined by the World Health Organization, they indicate that it's still too soon to be able to evaluate if those concentrations, low concentrations, can come in time to generate some sort of effect. That is something that only the years will tell, and that is why the insistence of attacking the sources of contamination. The problem is not in the sea, the marine, or the biota. It's in the proportion that we are having. And that is why we have several and I mean, it can be complemented by the solutions of information. Who has helped us a lot. Now a colleague, not a colleague of a career, but that has graduated and has participated throughout the project.
Is education. When we ask the persons, what do you think is the best way to dispose of a medicine? I just threw him in the sink. Whatever. That's a big problem. But there is not enough available information. As scientists, we need more effort to take this information to the person, so education is one of the fundamental pillars we have to work as society from childhood. They don't think in polluting the environment. They just behave as they saw their parents. So we need to change this mentality to teach new generations how to dispose of these medicines and the right ways to dispose of waste. E-Waste Project, Juan Luis, Professor, what's your vision with the project in the care of the environment? If you had the opportunity when you were in the keynote yesterday, one of the points that were expressed there, Mr. Jampion, one of the things of mitigating or reducing the number of the levels of carbon was protecting the ocean energy. What we're looking for is to try to provide more importance somehow to impact the production of energy. Not tomorrow, but in a near future to help that this type of energy would be of common use, even if it is a clean and renewable energy, better than air and hydro. But it's having right now zero use. We don't have any this any type of device providing us with energy. So try to promote research to increase efficiency, to have a better system to collaborate of the energetic matrix of the countries and to be part of the world agenda. Carbon neutral. Here in our country, this project is aligned with the National Plan of Energy, improving efficiency, promoting renewable energy. Hello. Question is, you have explained that the project seeks to reduce costs to produce energy derived from the waves. There is some devices, but we don't have any. Why it's so expensive to produce energy from the waves if we have such an abundant, such a big ocean? Why the project is called E-Wave? Maybe the last question. This E-Wave is called because students began with the project wanted to have a E as E-Wave as wave is energy from sea waves. Respect of the other one, why energy is so expensive. We have some background. Even if it is true that this is not new, the first patent was French to extracting energy from the ocean. In 1799, a long time ago, until we had the oil crisis in the 70s, people start thinking about it. The idea as such sounds strange, but it is not so innovative. The problem is the ocean. The ocean is very aggressive. A device have to confront such power. I have a device to generate certain energy, but in order for the device to resist all of the energy of the ocean have to be designed to be able to resist 100% the strength of the ocean, to resist everything. You will have to be redesigned. So such is not there, but it's still very expensive. To add, transportation costs in order to have to transport this energy, you maintain such energy is very expensive, maintenance, creation, everything. We have to find a way to make it cheap. Professor, in terms of the project, what would be the role of students? Super important. Here in the picture, we have some participants, those who were from the tech. We had students from University of Costa Rica, UNA, UNED, a lot of stuff involved to deal with the 5 goals, and we're the ones who provided the spirit in terms of trips, late at night, they had to stay late at night, early in the morning. They never got tired. When your revolutions were going down, they were still sustaining the vivacity of youth, and they are the ones who motivate you. Without them, in general, plus the group of researchers and those who participated somehow in the project, without them, we wouldn't have been able to get the results we got. I don't know if you want to tell your experience.
Sí, bueno, fueron 2 años de proyecto
2 years,
bastante cansados
the
y
project,
bastante largo.
very
Sin
tiring,
embargo,
very long.
una de las cosas más bonitas
One of the
realmente
beautiful
es
things
cómo
is
uno
how
tiene
even
la oportunidad de
when
tener
you're a
ese
student, you have an opportunity to have a
nivel.
professional
En este
experience,
caso, al
top
ser un
level,
proyecto que
being a
involucraba no
project to involve not
solamente
only
universidades,
public universities and also foreign universities, whereas with the opportunity with thousands of professionals, and you learn a lot. The level of responsibilities, even not just at the lab level, but manage really size requirements. A lot of factors, a lot of problems that have to be solved, and persons don't have all the time in the world to deal with questions and problems. So we had to support them in that way. I learned personally a lot. It was very helpful to be educated as a professional. We have a lot of questions. We don't have time for all of them, but they're doing the best we can.
¿En qué
We,
consiste el proceso de
the process
depuración de ostras y cómo
of
hacen los
debugging
ostricultores
of
y
the
cómo es
oysters,
posible depurar?
how can
Bueno, gracias por la
debug,
pregunta.
how they clean the
El
oysters.
proceso dentro del proyecto Ecomar lo que hicimos
Within
fue
the
evaluar
project,
ese
we
proceso
evaluated the
depurado
process,
que se realiza en la ECMAR,
what they do
específicamente
in
la
the
Universidad
EGMAR,
Nacional.
in the National University.
Así como estaba diseñado,
As it was
básicamente
designed,
una agua que recircula bajo una
is
radiación
the,
ultravioleta se
the
elimina
circulation of
la parte
water
microbiológica.
and UV.
Sin embargo,
You
dentro del
eliminate the
proyecto
microbiological
evaluamos si
part, but in the
ese proceso de
project,
depuración
we
que
evaluated
implica
if
parte
that
microbiológica
process
también logra
was enough
eliminar
to
aquellos
eliminate
fragmentos
also
que hayan sido
those
ya acumulados o
drugs who had
patógenos,
been
claro está, no
bioaccumulated
autorizados.
and not
Ya no autorizados, ya hubiera
metabolized.
salido, no sé, Ecomar punto 1, 2, 3, 4, no sé, 50 tal vez.
I don't know.
Entonces, nosotros nos
We
encargamos solo de monitorear a
just
aquellos que
monitor
habían sido
those
bioacumulados
who
y
had
que el proceso de
bioaccumulated,
depuración
and
hubiera mostrado
which
alguna
after
eliminación de
this
infección. Y
cleaning would have
además,
shown
dentro del
any other
proyecto
problem. Within the
se
project,
realizó la compra de
we purchased equipment, water that is being circulated becomes at the end a result. Yes, most of the contaminants detected, we had to many tissue analysis before and after cleaning process, and after there is a reduction in some molecules and elimination of them in the tissues, not accumulating the metabolites. So it had you have a double, yes, the muscles, as you know, are not clean. They go through different cooking processes, as we have instructed by our culture. That go through processes both countries, reduction in e-way as I mentioned before, e-way began in 2015, basically. In school, who approach me, Prof. We want to have a project of marine investigation research, and I thought the idea was great. So that's the reason of being of e-way. The role is huge. In fact, it's a wonderful experience for them because the mechanical design you see in the screen, developed by the students, and everything you see in the videos in building the device, the generating tank of artificial waves, all of that was with the tirelessly contribution of the students. They provided the energy for the progress of the project. So we have a tank, and everything we have there was done by the students. One of the questions we have here, through a QR code, hurricanes. Have you considered hurricanes in the web? Would they be more beneficial, creating more waves? What do you think? It's one of the conditions in terms of designing a device. But what is being reported in the literature in that case, we deactivate the device. I think at the end of the video we have a company Webstar. What they do, it's when the ocean, when we have a storm, we raise the platform in order for it to stop, but the platform have to support, to stand the storm. In Gibraltar, we have a web breaker, and during a storm the device was raised, so it was not working. So yes, we have a lot of energy, but the device does not have the capability of collecting, of transforming this energy. One question for each research project. In the future, what do we expect from each research project? What is your maximum desire? The main? We don't have one. It's very difficult because there are several of them. To create a monitoring center, to become a reference center for the whole Central American area, so we can take advantage of the technical, professional capability, instrumental that we have in order to monitor not just emerging contaminants, but persistent contaminants in coastal areas and the aquatic matrix and organisms. Another wish is to support all of these associations, coastal areas, which are vulnerable, who need more support and guide. It's not enough of what we have done. We have a lot of limitations where we can contribute, not just to stay of mariculture, but to introduce some other projects as fishing. The third one will be to have this not just to be part of a legislation, but to be part of the education and decision-making stakeholders, municipalities, entities who have to regulate from basic education with the Ministry of public education. These are our three main wishes for the future.
Y en el caso de
In
Ewell,
the case of e-web, the main wish is, I think, we have one which is outstanding, is to be able to take advantage of the energy we have in the ocean to contribute to socioeconomic development of the coastal areas. We have a long way to go, but hope that the Technological Institute of Costa Rica to contribute with our knowledge for developing this type of system. We're just testing a strategy of optimal control to improve the efficiency of those systems. We have indications that the control systems are very good. So we have to experiment with them. And if this transcends to the international community, will be a big progress in designing and building those systems and to put in place this technology
ahora,
that is just
le
beginning.
voy a solicitar a cada
Now,
científico, ¿verdad? De cada
I'll
equipo de
ask
trabajo
each
para
scientist
darles contactos a
to
ustedes,
provide
si desean
you with the
buscarlos,
contacts,
contactarlos, o unirse al proyecto, porque las
or
manos
if you want to join the
nunca
project,
sobran. Más bien siempre
there are
hacen
not
falta.
enough
Empezamos
hands.
por Ecomar.
Ecomar.
Bueno, como les comenté desde el inicio,
As I mentioned at the very beginning, thank you for being here to listen about the two projects coordinated. Nancy Arisa Castro. You can contact me, institution Narisa, at itcr.ac.cr. Every type of help is welcome. What we want is to impact to, and everything that will contribute with our goals is welcome. eWeb, Juan Guerrero, Christopher, as you can see in the screen, we're available and open. Comments, collaboration, possibilities, we're open. Thank you.
Jefferson, tal vez.
Jefferson, maybe? I don't belong to the tech. So, I'm open to collaborate in any project of research with Comal. I'll be my personal mail, Jefferson Romero, at
Bueno, muchísimas gracias. Aprovechamos también
I
este espacio
did
para saludar a Juan Luis
greetings to
Salazar.
Juan Luis
Él es
Salazar.
nuestro
He's
subdirector
our
de
Vice
investigación
Director
y
of
extensión,
Research.
a quien damos también
So
una
we send him
cordial bienvenida por estar aquí y agradecemos mucho que haya podido
greetings and we thank
acompañarnos esta
him
mañana.
for being
Les
here today.
agradecemos
Thank
mucho
you
su participación
for
en
your
este conversatorio
participation in
denominado
this conversation.
Costas saludables y energéticas,
Healthy,
contribuciones
energetic
tecnológicas de
coastals,
Costa
the
Rica al
contribution of
desarrollo
the
socioeconómico
technological of Costa
local
Rica
a través de
in
la
the developing
valorización de los
in
recursos
terms of the
naturales.
natural
Les
resources
invitamos a seguir
assessment.
con más actividades del
Please
Comité de
be
Política
with,
de Integración de Saberes
join more
para
activities
Océanos
of this
Sostenibles
Congress.
2024. Que tengan un lindo día.
Have a
Muchísimas
good day.
gracias.
Thank you. morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. From the Technical National University, we have this forum taking advantage of marine waters for the development of sea culture, different perspectives of the stakeholders, introducing those in the table. Carlos Alvarado Ruiz, promotion of fishing, aquaculture, Esteban Soto Martinez, professor, animal health of University of California Downs, Eric Patterson Rodriguez, manager, sub-manager in production, Aqua Foods, located in our country, and Nelson Peña Navarro, director of the Engineer School and researcher of the Technical University. To begin with, brief introduction of our topic. Sea culture have experienced great growth. 2020 report just worldwide 68% of million of tons of water animals were cultivated in the waters. It has become a key factor for an economic food production. The report shows that this production should have a blue transformation to provide food of quality to the most vulnerable, to promote jobs and equality for coastal communities, and also taking care of environmental responsibility. This blue responsibility requires the commitment for companies, communities, governments, private sector to work in terms of sustainability and food production. Costa Rica, we can mention some limitations: sanitary management, disarticulation of the sectors, lack of tech improvement. We don't have an existing ordering of the water space, lack of funds, just to mention some. Water culture is a dynamic field, national, international, and it's always expanding, looking for innovative solutions, policies. We'll begin with a section of questions. From your perspective, you'll answer, and then we have a Q&R with the public. It's important from your personal perspective and the companies or institutions that you represent. What is the state of sea culture, mariculture, sea culture? Mr. Peña. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being with us in this forum. It's one of the forums related to sea culture, related especially very interesting problems for food safety. For respect to the question, we have several important points that are being developed worldwide related to sea culture expansion and sustainability. Sea culture is one of the agricultural activities with the greatest expansion. Is being projected at about 20% worldwide to develop in the next few years in terms of production and the number of products. Another one of the important parts is seafood and algae. In the last few years, we have had an increase of 500,000 kilos worldwide increase in oysters, a growth of 4.5 million of oysters produced right now. Sea culture it's developing hugely, and we have to deal with the climate change, and these species, many of them are resistant to climate change. So it's a very important resource for production and the generation of food. It will provide food for the next few years. Good morning, everyone. I want to stress the organization in charge of compiling statistics about fishing and all that. It's FAO has been compiling statistics for 70 years in terms of sea culture, is to observe what have been the event. In the 90s, 2.5 metric tons of products derived from the ocean. 2020 went up to 35 metric tons. So it's evident that this industry is growing. If we consider what our colleague is showing, microalgae having a very important, if we add the production of water animals and microalgae, these figures for 2020 reach 68.1 metric tons. Being so, I'd like to explain how is the sea culture in Costa Rica. Costa Rica, we have big projects as Martech company that produces snipper in Quepos in the Atlantic area. It has about 1.8 thousand tons. The second one is coastal and continental, and shrimp 1.
And the other part of the mariculture, of the ocean production, is a production, the small-scale production where we have the oyster farms and that of mussels, and also some production of shrimp and fish in cages. In regard to the production of oysters, according to the data that we have, we at Incropesca last year, we generated 12.4 metric tons of oysters, shells, 600. So we see that we are growing, but we believe that we want this production to grow because we believe that it's very sustainable and that we need to generate a greater possibility with the diversification of species. Well, good morning to all of you. Welcome. Thank you for the invitation. As I was presented before, and I'm a little bit different to my colleagues here, I am a professor at the University of California in Bailey, so I'm going to give you a little bit of the perspective more internationally with regard to what the colleagues might say from here. As it has been mentioned by Nelson, one of the problems, I'm a veterinarian also, so many of my comments are going to be aimed at animal health and and the potential human health also. The dynamic, as Nelson has already mentioned it, in agriculture in general, including the mariculture, has changed in spite of the fact that globally, as it was mentioned by Carlos, it has increased in the last decades. It has fluctuated between one country and another, between one time and another, and part of this fluctuation has also has been caused by illnesses that have caused great damage in mariculture. If we put as an example, the U.S., one of the largest countries in regard to mariculture in the American continent, is Chile. And Chile changed radically some 10 years ago when there was a huge epidemic caused by a virus, the infectious salmonellus virus, ISA. So it has fluctuated a lot. That is important to acknowledge that, like any other production sector, animal production sector, the mariculture can be affected by illnesses in the United States and Canada. This dynamic is also something that has been affecting for some 5 or 10 years, partly because of a diagnosis of a virus that has not been tested yet, that is associated to an illness, but that social political pressures have led practically to bankruptcy of this industry, particularly in the western coast of the United States and Canada. So, it has been described very well, the state of the mariculture in America, globally, but we do have to understand that this has not simply been a dynamic going up. In some sectors, in some countries, and there's a great challenge that has to be acknowledged, that we also have to acknowledge the existence of this industry. Go ahead, please. I believe I love mariculture, aquaculture, to see it some way. If one day you want to eat a piece of chicken or a piece of avian meat or beef or something, we don't go to the jungle or the forest to try to obtain some sort of that protein. I'd like to make that association with the aquaculture and the mariculture, particularly, that we are now in that process of transformation. There is, in this report that the FAO was just mentioning, that the FAO is making, and that Carlos was just mentioning a while ago, there's a very interesting graph that those who are related to the aquaculture world have seen it before, and it is how the aquaculture has been growing, or how the products that we consume of aquaculture origin with regard to those that come from fishery. And the trend throughout time is that aquaculture is growing to obtain these products with regard to the reduction in the fishery that currently the next report is about to be issued. We are approximately 50-50 of what we consume comes from aquaculture, and 50% comes from fishery. 50-50%. Obviously here we're including a lot of the continental aspect, the matter related to the algae, as mentioned, was just mentioning, but the mariculture is under constant growth. And with the comparison that I was just making in the beginning, right now we are going through a continuous learning curve. There are some species, or many species, that we have somehow dominated the technological package to see what they suffer, what they eat, how they eat, in what stages do I have to do certain harvesting of that species. And that is the case, like, for example, the tilapia and the salmon. Because we have developed that technology, or here in Costa Rica and Aquafood and Marteco, in the cases of the region, we are constantly learning of how to domesticate these species so that we can understand how they have to eat, what they have to eat, what are the main affections that they suffer at the level of health, and so forth. So many of that was happening right now. That's what's happening right now at the level of the world, throughout the world. We are learning how to domesticate new species and how that package is and how that road is to be able to understand it. Now that I was just making a comparison with the animal production systems, if I have a production of poultry, I know how to establish a diet for amino acids to see what they have to eat in certain stages of their life. But nevertheless, in the part of mariculture, normally we use diets that are general for marine life, and they might be a focus or approach that is more herbivore and others are omnivores, but a diet that is more herbivore or a little more aimed at carnivores. But it's part of that reflection that I would like to make, that right now, not only do we have to see that this mariculture is not something that is written and that we have the recipe, the perfect recipe to understand how it's going to work, but it's learning on the way, and this is what we're doing in Martech every day, because there are days in which I say, well, the truth is I have not even questioned myself how this can work. I have not asked myself if we're using the optimum feed or not, or any other thing related to the breeding of these fishery. And that's the way we're learning, and we're constantly learning along with the development of that technological packaging. Thank you very much. And I have a key word that was presented by the participants, which is the knowledge. The knowledge and the continuous learning. I would like to know that starting from to being able to develop any productive activity, you need this training, constant training, to be able to go from the empiric to the fact to the incorporation of new technologies. What are the main barriers or the main limitations that you consider that have impeded the professionalization of the activity at the level of at the national level? I would like to begin with Don Eric. With this topic, well, I think that it goes hand in hand with what I have just mentioned just now, and it is that at the end we are an industry, an incipient industry, and I put this from the point of view of my perspective, when I need to buy a piece of wood of 74 millimeters, or when I have to go access a network or a structure that is used as a cage, and we use a hatcher when we need a specific technology for filtering systems or disinfection systems or any other type. It's not like I'm going and having a vendor like they do have in the salmon industry, or maybe even the tilapia itself, in which you talk about this in places like in Chile, and these are towns that are completely dedicated to the aquaculture. Like here in Costa Rica at a given moment, we said that all the infrastructure was established for banana and coffee. In salmon, we could do that in comparison with those places of Chile where they already have all the ease and all the knowledge to continue on advancing in that matter of agriculture. In the case of Chile, you basically have a farm, but the majority of the services you obtain them from other companies that provide them outsourced. There's another company that provides you the service of harvesting. There's another company that provides you the service of fixing the nets. And they're dedicated only to feeding and overseeing my growth processes. And obviously, they are at another level in which maybe here we are just feeding with a little shovel every day. There are companies over there where there's a person from an office and they have some controls feeding via a camera all the cages of the salmons. So I think that is where things go. And being pioneers in an activity, using our example of Martech, our example, being worldwide producers of snapper, the pink snapper or spotted snapper, we have to discover that, and as we discover it, they also to generate the technology and to generate the professional teams. And I think that right now we are 4 professionals in Martech as such, working directly in we have had British, Venezuelan, Colombian, Mexicans, people who have gone through there. So this is an industry in which we have to use people that have had experience in other places, and we have to, with experiences, and we have to grow evenly on that, of where to find the resources, of where to get the knowledge, and where to obtain the labor that is going to work in those industries. I would summarize this in 3 points. First, commitment. The second, it would be diversification, and then transparency. For each one of those, I would go a little deeper. Commitment in the sense that it has to come from the private part to the public sector, and particularly governmental. There has to be a monetary commitment, and there has to be a social commitment. The monetary commitment, I'm not saying that it has to come only from the state. The majority of the monetary commitment has to come from the private industry, in my opinion. And this commitment has to be focused on establishing education, training at every level of professionals, at all levels of professionals that are required to be able to make this industry grow. It's not a new industry. It's an industry that has thousands of years. From Egypt, they have harvested fish, but it is very new in the country, in different sectors. In corporations, Cañas was a pioneer. Martec is a pioneer also, but we're talking about two species. One that is not even native of the zone. Costa Rica has a great deal of resources. It might have a diversification that is tremendous. It might start harvesting other types of producing other types of fish that with an education at different levels, with professionals all the way from private enterprises to the level of academic institutions like the National University, the UNED, the Tech, and the UNM. Can give the service of not only research but also of service, and with that they can make the industry grow. But once again, this has to be followed by commitment and transparency. Of course, it is clear. I have been on a sabbatic here this year in Costa Rica. This has given me the opportunity of being in different programs of education and of service in Colombia and Guatemala. In Guatemala last week, and in Colombia 3 weeks ago. And it's interesting that every one of the productive sectors have the same conclusion, where they have to look at the transparency, where the state and the monitoring to see what problems they have, what problematics they have, to share that problematic, and to try to work together towards resolution of that problem. But that transparency is something that we don't have. And it's something that is important to acknowledge and recognize and to work on it, so that the different pieces that are made necessary for the industry to grow in Costa Rica have that transparency and that commitment. And we give the floor now to Don Carlos. Okay, going over the consultation that was made, the need for a greater professionalization of the agriculture in Costa Rica. Evidently, it is a milestone of this industry. And I would like to go back a little bit in time. The production of sea shrimp in this country began in the 1970s. And since that date to this moment, we have not changed much the way of producing the species. Nowadays, the world is very accelerated. The information is available. The technologies are right around the corner, and we need to be able to improve this activity, this specific activity of the production of shrimp, to use the technology. One of them is the use of acoustic equipment that detect the infest of the shrimp, and that improves the production. And how is the production done in our countries? Well, feeders are established, test and trial is carried out, the expertise of the technician that is there feeding the shrimp farm, that's something that is taken into account. But as I say, in opening it up to so much knowledge, now we have had recently a new scientific article produced where as the models of growth are established for the shrimp, taking into consideration the rate of growth and temperature, and validating these models with many production farms. So if there's not a professional that can take this information and process it and apply it on the field, we are not going to be able to give that step forward towards technological development. So It is a need. The genetic improvement is another important factor for the improvement of the species and that knowledge. And now this is linked not only to a traditional knowledge of selection or of the best specimens, but also for the genome selection. And in that, our country is very, very short in comparison to what has been said in other countries like Chile and Norway. So there is a need that we have to resolve, and we need to advance in deepening into the professional level so that we can improve the productivity. Go ahead, please. With regard to this issue, at a national level, the professionalization of the aquaculture activity has been very, very slow. In the last 7 years, at the National Technical University, the National Technical University generated the first degree with a bachelor's, and they were possibly going on to another degree, the licentiate. We have graduated approximately 40 professionals with a specialty in aquaculture, and all these people have, one way or another, tried to effectively professionalize the activity as such. Nevertheless, this is associated to several limitations. One of the most important is the matter related to regulation and governance of the activity, with which Carlos is the promoter for aquaculture production, and this has been relatively slow. For example, this year we have worked on several projects with oysters trying to technify the industry, but it's only until this year. 30 years have gone by since the production began, and only until this year we were able to technify this. What does achieving a technification project mean? That this is associated to the need of trained staff, because it's not the same to have a peon that knows how to use the equipment, how to interpret it, and how to resolve problems, than to have this person that is specialized that might be able to do it because he or she has undergone a training process, maybe even at a university level. So for Central America, for example, there are equal programs in the same conditions, but the technification is much more advanced than in Costa Rica. And this is one of the main limitations that we have. As it was mentioned already by Esteban, I think, he's the one that commented it, the matter of financing. The aquaculture sector in Costa Rica has very little financing. And having very little financing, there is not an expansion of the industry as such in the different areas that are executed at this moment. So this implies a greater limitation for these professionals to be able to locate themselves in these companies. Nevertheless, in spite of this, with the job that has been done, that we are also doing training for the small producers. Well, for example, companies such as Martec, that before had to bring people from Brazil and Chile because they were the specialists in mariculture. Well, they are now little by little being substituted. Now they have professionals from the Costa Rican area and also for other areas of Central America. So what are the factors that are necessary when you have people that are trained, and people who know how to manage the quality of water, and people who know how to work on climate change, who know how to look at the matter of resilience? And here we have Esteban was a specialist in the matter related to illnesses and plagues, the topic of emerging illnesses. For example, only in shrimp, for this year there are 10 emerging illnesses. And so how do we handle that? It's not the person that has maybe 10 or 15 years feeding, that has never received any training, that they have done it all through their own experience. It's working with people that have had a degree of knowledge that is additional and that might be able to solve all these problems. So what are the important issues here? Well, we have the matter related to governance and regulations, because based on that, all the projects are derived, and the matter related to financing as such, and the topic related to the management of the problems of the productive sectors. So this is the only person who can work on these topics is people who are trained with university degrees in these specialties. So if there is a lot of limitation, but at the level of national level, for example, that is, by the way, has just been accredited by CISOS. That it would be one way or another favoring this problem, and giving a real contribution to this growth and this expansion at the academic level associated to matters of agriculture in general. And obviously the topic that associated to this, which is the topic of agriculture as such. Okay, I would like to also rescue the word that has been mentioned, lack of communication, transparency, and articulation between the different entities implied in the development of these activities. Based on this, I would like the people in the main panel to comment. Maybe they can do it from the academia with Mr. Esteban and Mr. Nelson, and then Don Carlos and Don Eric. So they can comment from the development of their working fields, which have been the main limitations that you have encountered to be able to provide this articulation, for this articulation to take place. So if you want, we can begin with Esteban and then Nelson. As it was commented before, at the level of agriculture, there have been different topics that have been hot topics worldwide, since the welfare of the fish, all the way from the welfare of the fish and other animals of crop nutrition. That has been a limitation, a tremendous limitation for agriculture, and for the illnesses also. With regard to the illnesses, which is the biggest point of my research, of the key points for research, of course, it is prophylactics. Basically, the use of activities or protocols that can prevent the illness. And that is, undoubtedly, for the different entities, the best of the situations. And what am I talking about? With this, vaccines, hydrostimulants, probiotics, and even genetic improvement, as it was mentioned before. Which are the limitations? Which is a very big limitation that we have to acknowledge, and it is clear in different countries. But we have seen it amplified in Latin America. It is the transparency of what we have and what we don't have. So one as a veterinarian, as a regulating entity, for the different sectors, you have to acknowledge or recognize that for the development or for the focus of diagnose, all the way from the development of these vaccines, the development of these probiotics and the genetic selections, you have to know what you're fighting against. It's not worthwhile to fight against an illness that has very little risk at a productive level in a country. It can be gigantic in other places, it might be very small here. But that transparency in Latin America is very much a hit, and it's mainly done at the social level and also at the private level of the industry, because of a fear of recognizing that we have this illness, and everybody just keeps quiet. Nobody wants to acknowledge that the illness exists, but they do want to begin by putting pressure on the government of establishing antibiotics, of putting vaccines and testing this and testing that. And many times this develops a cascade of events that generates a disorder. At the end of the day, they end up getting involved in genetics that they don't know where they came. They can put clandestine antibiotics that not only impact the animal health, but it can also affect the public health. But it can generate more problems even yet. And all this, unfortunately, is at a social level where it is expanded. When they're later, there is a fake information disseminated of the mariculture because of the poor decisions that have been made in different times. So going back to the transparency, I think that it is very important, the acknowledgement of what we have, what are the problems, because in every industry, in every country, they're going to be different, to share those problems very clearly and to work together to prevent them in the future. As Esteban is mentioning it, during the production, aquaculture production locally and also worldwide, because everything falls on the very little that we work on in Costa Rica. One of the main limitations that we have is obviously in the matter of innovation and technology. There are several points that are very important that have to be solved in these areas, and that little by little, through academia, through governments, they try to join efforts to be able to solve these problems that we have. For example, the optimization of the production. We have already talked about this, Carlos and Esteban. The matter of genetic improvement is fundamental. The capability of resistance of illnesses, sustainable feed is something that is important, to not have that pressure on the fisheries, on the wild fisheries. What Esteban says is fundamental, and that is the matter related to monitoring and the control, what kind of illnesses are affecting, which are the ones that have the greatest impact, which can be forecasted that might appear in the next 5 years. Fundamental, the reduction of the environmental impact. There is not a project in Costa Rica in agriculture that goes through Incopesca if it doesn't have already an environmental impact study. So the agriculture and the mariculture have a small environmental impact. There is not a production that doesn't have an environmental impact. But the mariculture, when we compare it with a production of beef or poultry or other similar activities, is much less the impact. So it is fundamental to try to solve it, because that's the way that we're going to generate a better capacity of growth of the industry, especially in Costa Rica. And when we talk about the relationship that there is between the academia and the state, well, we do have several limitations that have been added to the matters related to innovation and production, the transfer of knowledge, to regulate the policy and the, for example, to create here or to have a concession in Costa Rica. We're having what? 1 year, 2 years at this moment, Carlos, and that they have made the process more expedite, because before it was impossible to have a concession. The National Technical University last year had a concession produced for projects of mariculture, and it took us almost a year. And it could be much faster. The problem is that when it goes into a governmental entity, it takes up to 2 times the time to resolve this. And this is how we collect the information up until we come to this. And I'm sure that if there was a little more agility in the process, in the governmental administrative process, we might be able to have concessions approved by Incopesca, which is the final approval entity, in less than 6 months. So I believe that this is a point that has to be expedited so that we can achieve that better link. And obviously, the promotion of the mariculture at a national level. So we have the project of Martec, which is in Quepos, but how many years have gone by for the company to come back with the same characteristics to establish its operation in our oceans? Well, there's really not any of that. So we have to promote that, and we have to see how we can do it. In Costa Rica is a country that I imagine that the majority of you are Costa Ricans. It is a very expensive country, and the social expenditure in Costa Rica is almost 30% of the income of the salaries. So this makes the product be much more expensive than other countries in Central America as such. And these are things that we have to analyze to see how we can promote to have the installation of more companies in Costa Rica, not in other countries, that have been developing with greater agility, like the case of Panama, that is relatively close to us. Well, yes, we're taking the consultation. How is that job between the academia, the institutionality of the state, and the private company? Well, from my point of view, this triad is not the best. We have to articulate a better relationship. The academia should come close to the industry and ask what are its needs and how can we help. What are the needs of research, and the institutionality, as it was mentioned by Nelson, is something that does not contribute a lot to the speed of going through the red tape. The agriculture in Costa Rica is relatively recent. People don't understand the concept. If you go to Setena and you talk to them about a lantern where you're going to put the oysters, and that is something that messes everything up to them. If they talk about a purifying plant, they don't understand. That makes it difficult because there is not approach. There is not a consultation made. The person is not called upon to clarify the issues. And we also have to take into consideration that the institution that I represent is the guiding entity of the fishery and aquaculture. So if there's going to be a research project in matter of aquaculture, well, necessarily it has to go through the Incopesca, which has a commission, a specialized commission, designed for this purpose, for approval processes. And I would like to give you a case study. We had a meeting with our peers of Ecuador. Ecuador is the leader of the region in production of shrimp. Ecuador produced last year 1.2 million tons of shrimp, and this is something that is a great deal. All that shrimp, 60% of it is exported to the Asian market, to China, whole. So we asked them, well, how have you been able to come to these numbers? Well, it's that we made an adequate articulation of this. The academia have come to an agreement to resolve all the problems that this industry has. Illnesses, technological developments, and all the services that the sectors requires. And the government, the institutionality is what facilitated, the one that facilitated the processes for the red tape and the permits and so forth. And it became a facilitator, not an entity that obstructed the process. So this made that this example of a good articulation between the three of them allows for an industry to reach these levels like the ones that Ecuador has had, and that is years light ahead of us in regard to technification, genetic improvement, control of illnesses, and that other things that Costa Rica has not been able to reach.
Thank you, Don Carlos. I remember in college in environmental sociology, they were mentioning that for a long time. Academia, a big accomplishment of the university had been diversification of the things they were studying, not just sciences. Everyone was looking for specialization in biology, zoology, botanics, and so forth. But now climate change and environmental situation, again, we need to group ourselves as one to work. Mariculture as an opportunity, being a source of producing sustainable animal protein, needs this. We need this interdisciplinary articulation, not just each one doing their own thing. We talk about all the disciplines that somehow are related. Consider the way seawater for the fish, and we had thousands of legal problems. We were told we didn't stick to legislation. Which legislation? There's no legislation for doing this. We have to create it as we go. What other things are useful? So, legal framework. Understand how the government apparatus can collaborate with small producers of oysters, of mussels, to find administrative framework about the needs and how every protective sector works. We didn't have legislation precisely for sticking a pipe in the ocean. So how download fishes because I need to plant some of them in my farm. Different things, but we don't have any structure as such to do this. So we need articulate and have a better understanding. We've been doing very specific work, but we need a director to coordinate all of covered the schooling program. They have emphasized different activities in the country. They want one of the things they emphasize is production, and they have mentioned mariculture. So there is a relation to see what species can work with. Get feedback from them, different ways of presenting the product, assessment. At closing of the forum, I'd like to ask you, from your daily, what you have been able to observe, beginning with your experiences, what are the best practices or successful cases that can be replicated in the country, being our vision of sustainable development and practices that we can learn from these successful initiatives? Don Nelson. Worldwide, we have many successful cases of mariculture. That is productive system that have that began 10 or 15 years ago. Managing, implementing new technologies. Some examples. Norway, in Atlantic salmon, Chile, salmon culture, mussels, Japan, algae, Alaska, algae. We saw the statistics, the growth has been huge. Everything is related to sustainable practices, implementation of new technology, implementation of new tendencies related to the use of AI, of IA, use of drones, every water quality management examples that allow us every device can be brought to the country to optimize production. The example in Copesca related to Technical University and UC are seeking new technologies for shrimp. It's just one prototype and been doing only for this year. We have had many limitations in terms of pathogens that have devastated the industry, but they have recouped. They develop new technologies in genetic improvement. And mariculture provide us with a guarantee of food safety. We need to keep developing this for the next 30 years. And to develop national mariculture because they provide one of the best yields and good protein. That's what we have nationwide. And international examples, there are many to adapt and improve industry here. Lagging behind is organic production. 35,000 metric tons. Asian Pacific, 97%. Korea, Indonesia, China. Agriculture as such is one of the most sustainable activities in the world. This is a tech report by FAO in 2011, and it goes beyond in terms of sustainability to all the other animal productions. This tech document from FAO established that terrestrial land animals are cause 25% of greenhouse gases. Land animals, we use 50% of all land not covered by ice, and they consume 75% of water. This does not happen in agriculture. We in agriculture has a mitigation in climate, warming, climate change. Beef production have generated deforestation, pollution. Agriculture with no technologies have very low emissions. One of the systems are those technologies that we need to duplicate here. The closed systems, recirculation systems, and the systems of production. In the case, I would like to mention that we have developed production of shrimp in closed systems with biofloc technology. We take the shrimp from the Pacific and we cultivated 300 meters above sea level in a station of Nicopesca. So you have an idea the productivity in a tank, shrimp tank, of 1 hectare, according to data of a research Alfaro y Moya, what is generated by square meter in a farm, a current farm, are 0.087 kilos by square meter. We generate in biofloc system 1.7 kilos in a closed system of kilos of shrimp. It's just you have to air the air and you have a carbon source. This technology provided by apiculture allow for an activity to be more sustainable. If I improve genetically, they grow faster, they need less food. For cattle, I need 7 kilos of grass for 1 kilo of beef. In aquaculture, with 0.7, I produce a kilo of biomass. So you have an idea. I agree with my colleagues with respect to potential I see in mariculture. Sustainability is amazing and is potentially can be adopted in Costa Rica. Several examples I have seen in different sectors. Adoption of native species, how this can help the species that could be near extinction. In the USA, we can have the case of white sturion. Until 1990, the population was low with apiculture. When they closed the cycle, white sturion, we have a big opportunity but at the level, social level, and created opportunities. Sturgeon, they're talking about association in governmental entities, private sector, academia. The private sector adopted the culture of sturgeon, white sturgeon in caviar. They went back to plant different lakes and rivers, and was the origin of growth of this species when they returned to their natural environment. Halibut Californian and the Californian sea bass. There's potential. Costa Rica, big potential. We have the species, we have the water, we have the potential. At health level, successful stories, adoption of vaccines. This creates a big potential once they're recognized or approved. The right diagnostics is important. Biosecurity protocol, biohealth. This is the best practices in production. Vaccination in countries as Norway, these practices were adopted in the 80s and the 90s. They got a reduction almost of 100% of microbial. We have not seen this in Latin America. And we use drugs that can have a negative effect and also towards the environment and the human population. So the use of vaccines is potential, but we need the right diagnosis and with the right working team. So not just to talk about the United States, native species development have been developed in Colombia and it's already developed in Brazil. So as a potential, has a big potential for Costa Rica. Again, I think we talk about the same, is to look for species diversification, how to manage them. From 2 points that provide success as a country. Approach, environmental sustainability, agriculture, certain systems are related, have been affected by climate change. Mariculture, this is reflected even more. We have realized with this, with the changes, the fluctuation of sea temperatures, we're exposed to the ocean. I feel bad about the small fishes. We return them to the ocean, but we don't know what were they going to find with all of these climate problems. So sustainability must be social also. We have to understand the people. They have to be the center of this activity. Living together with the environment, and at the end, we have to emphasize images of those producers. I don't even work with fishes because I haven't seen a fish in the whole day, and I think it's the same with you. I work with people that work with fishes. They are the ones who are working every day in the islands, the oysters, shrimps. My friends who are in the companies, who are learning, who are teaching, to all of us. In Marte, we have cases of Marte. That's persons who work here. They don't have college study. They have just finished school. They know 50 times more about agriculture. They know how to measure the fish. People just look at the tank and they know there are 38,000 fishes. They see how they move and they're very precise in their observations about the number of fishes, about the disease. They are very talented. But you must be a little bit crazy because you need to feel passion to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to deal with the oxygen system and dealing with storms. It's a very passionate activity. Success is there to grow in a sustainable way, in social and environmentally.
Bueno, al finalizar este set de preguntas y escuchar los invaluables aportes de nuestros invitados, quisiera abrir la posibilidad al público si quieren hacer alguna pregunta.
If any one of you want to ask any questions, you can raise your hand.
Bueno, si no existe
Otherwise,
pregunta de parte del público, quisiera darle las gracias
I
a
want to
nuestros
thank
invitados,
our
nuevamente
guests
por
for
compartir
sharing
conocimiento
this
con
knowledge
nosotros y
with us,
permitirnos
for allowing
construir
us
una
to
idea
build
de lo que es la maricultura,
an
y
idea
cómo
of
se está
what is
desarrollando la
mariculture,
y la
how it
importancia que tiene
is
para
developing and
poder
importance
cumplir
in
tanto a
order
nivel
to
internacional
comply
como nacional
internationally
con
and
los
nationally with the
objetivos
goals
de la Agenda
of the
2030.
2030
Quisiera
agenda.
solicitar, por favor, un aplauso
Please
para
give
nuestros
them a
participantes.
hand.
Y agradecerles a ustedes por
And thank you
participar
for your
en
participation
este foro
for
conversatorio.
this forum. Have a good afternoon.